Baptism is. Baptism is done for the forgiveness of sins. Acts 2:38. Baptism is done to save us. 1 Peter 3:21, Acts 2:40, Mark 16:16. Baptism is done to wash away our sins. Acts 22:16. Baptism is done to be reborn to new life. John 3:5, Romans 6:3-6. Baptism is done to clothe ourselves with Christ. Galatians 3:26 and 27.
Families don't function as families. The church will have problem functioning as the family of God, because we're all a part of that family. Peter said, husbands, give honor unto your wife as unto the weaker vessel. Why? That your prayers be not hindered. If I didn't convince you last night the devil can't hinder your prayer, then I didn't do a very good job. But there is one thing that can hinder your prayer. It's called fighting at home. If you argue and fight at home, guess what? Your prayer is going to bounce off the ceiling. The only hindrance to prayer is dysfunctional family. Why? Because he's Father. And if we're having a problem in this structure, we're going to translate this way, and we're going to even be afraid to talk to him. We won't even address him because he's Father. We've got to have our families operating properly if we want to be healthy in life. If we want our church to be healthy, we got to develop healthy relationships. Let us stand. If you're standing by your family, would you take them by the hand tonight? I want us. There's no one who can love you like Jesus can. No one has that kind of ability that he has. His touch is so gentle upon our life. When he touches you, he don't even leave fingerprints when he's through. Us humans don't know how to touch. We touch roughly. We hold roughly. But not him. When he touches our lives, he does it in a very, very gentle fashion. I'd like to read a couple of scriptures tonight as I begin. I'd like to read first from the book of Ephesians, the 5th chapter, and then chapter 6, and then Colossians. Ephesians 5, beginning in verse 20. Giving thanks always for all things unto God and the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, submitting yourselves one to another in the fear of God. Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto the Lord. For the husband is head of the wife, even as Christ is head of the church, and he is the Savior of the body. Therefore, as the church is subject unto Christ, so let the wives be unto their own husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it. Verse 28 says, so ought men to love their wives as their own bodies. He that loveth his wife loveth himself. For no man ever yet hated his own flesh, but nourished and cherished it, even as the Lord the church. Chapter 6, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor thy father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be well with thee, and thou mayest live long on the earth. And ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. In Colossians, the 3rd chapter, beginning in verse 18. Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands, as it is fit in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives, and be not bitter against them. Children, obey your parents in all things, for this is well-pleasing unto the Lord. Fathers, provoke not your children to anger, lest they be discouraged. Now, I have been told by many people that I'm on a soapbox and I have my own agenda about things in life, and I just might, but so did Paul. Paul twice addressed the fact that fathers should not provoke their children to wrath, or that he should not provoke them to anger. I want to talk about the family relationship tonight and the developmental process of life and what happens. And I want us to look at and understand some principles that the Bible has outlined that help us to deal with issues. Number one, let me first address submission. You know, we like to quote that scripture that says, "Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands," but that is not all that he said. He first said, submit yourselves one to another. Submission is a two-way street. We are both to be submitted. Hello? We're both to be submitted. My question is submission an authority issue? Is that what submission's about? Who's in charge? Submission is not an authority issue. Submission is an accountability issue. Who am I accountable to? If you are in charge without any accountability, you don't mind hurting people's feelings. Accountability or authority with no accountability produces Hitlers. When all I have is authority and I don't have any accountability, then my life will become warped, and I will not be sensitive to the needs of other people, and I will not mind hurting other people. Submission is a two-way street. I become accountable to a person to meet their needs in life. They become accountable to me to meet my needs in life. That's what a family is all about, learning to meet each other's needs. There are 5 basic needs in human beings. Those needs are love, freedom, a knowledge of God, familiarity with your emotions, and internal controls. Guess where I got that list? Out of a college textbook on psychology. Not a Christian textbook, but a secular textbook on psychology. We know that these are the needs in life that have to be met. If those needs are not met, we will not feel whole or complete. We have to have love. Where do you find love but in the family environment? We have to find freedom. Where can you find true freedom? At God's house. Where will you find true love? At God's house. Where will you find a knowledge of God? At God's house. Where will you find a familiarity with your emotions and know what your emotions are? At God's house. Where will you find internal controls or discipline? About God's house. The only place you'll ever meet the needs of life is through the house of God. Through becoming part of that family of God. Most of our adult problems have their beginnings in childhood. Not all of them, but most of them. Most of the struggles we have in life come from disappointments, disillusions, rejections, hurts that took place in our early life. I have a 72-year-old uncle who has not spoken to my mother since 1969. Mom calls him once a year and he hangs up on her. She is his only relative. He's her only relative. My older brother went by last summer to visit him. He lives in another city. He married a lady from the same city my uncle lives in. So he went by to visit him. And he wasn't quite sure whether he would receive him into his house. So he went by and he knocked on the door. And he came to the door and opened the door and invited him in. And Charles went in and sat down and began to talk to my uncle. Charles told me later, he said, I hadn't been there more than 2 minutes until he began to talk about how mean Grandpa was. That my dad never loved me. He never told me he loved me. He never showed me he loved me. He loved your mother. He loved my other brother, but he didn't love me. 72 years old, and the only thing he can talk about is Grandpa didn't love me. The older you get, the more focused you become on the issues of life you haven't settled. And if you don't get them settled, they will drive your life to chaos. You will become totally focused on those issues, and you won't be able to do anything else but focus on the issues of life that were never settled. There's been a philosophy that was taught through the years. I heard it many times growing up. I've heard it many times in my adult life. And that is, if you'll leave most things alone, they'll disappear over time. They'll work themselves out. That is the biggest lie that's ever been taught. Things don't disappear and work themselves out. The hurts of life have to be addressed. We have to heal. We have to allow the healing process of life to heal us and get on with life. What is a family? How do we constitute what a family is? The dictionary defines a family as a group of people of common ancestry. Well, that's very biological, but is that really what a family is? My definition of a family is a group of people living together in a society where each individual is given the privilege of failing without embarrassment. Now, that doesn't say children. That says individuals. See, mom and dad have to have the same right to make mistakes as children do. All of us are just grown-up kids, aren't we? Do you know most of us have no idea how old we are? You don't think of yourself as your age. I don't see myself as 43. About 27. I haven't seen this body age one day in my life. I see no gray hairs. I see no wrinkles. The only part of me I can see is from about here down. I'm on the inside looking out. All you see is the outside. I never see the outside. You say that's not true. You look at a mirror, but a mirror is a lie. Every time I go to the barber shop, they ask me what side I part my hair on, and I always tell them the left side. Is it on the left side? Why? Because a mirror is a reverse image. It is the opposite of what you are. You don't see yourself. You only see a reverse image of who you are. We don't see ourselves grow up. We haven't seen ourselves mature. Consequently, we settle problems as an adult like we did when we were 6 or 7 years old. We just develop better techniques using the same principles. You know, we learn early in life, if you don't play by my rules, I'll take my marbles and go home. Most people go into marriage with that same assumption. If you don't play by my rules, I'll take my marbles and go home. Don't work, does it? Before the age of 6, children have already learned their lifestyles. They've learned to be controllers, drivers, pleasers, victims, martyrs, charmers, getters, rationalizers, and so on. Before the age of 6. Children are very unique. An infant doesn't know that mom is separate than self. As they grow and mature, they come to realize that mom is a different being than I am. But in the initial beginning, after birth, they don't know the difference. They know there is a need, hunger, but that hunger is satisfied from the outside. For every act of love in a mature life, there is a template that originated in infancy. Life is a series of experiences that we have that correspond to internal and external happenings. The source of need and the source of relief are inseparable to an infant. The mother is experienced by the infant as being a person who is totally necessary and irreplaceable. In the first year of an infant's life, they recognize mother as someone special. They discover that she is the source of their joy, their satisfaction, their hunger, their comfort, that she is their protector, she is indispensable, that she is the most important person in their world. Dad feels in a category a little bit lower than mom does in the first year of life. I found parents who get jealous because they think the baby likes the other one more than they do them, and so there's conflict. There's insecurity. Her presence becomes the source of security, his feelings of security, his feelings of satisfaction, his feelings of contentment, his feelings of love. If these are the natural reactions to man at birth, are they not the similar reactions to the spiritual man after the new birth? Mother, who is the church, should become the source of joy, satisfaction, the one who feels the need of hunger, the comforter, the protector, the indispensable person in life. All love begins with that feeling of exclusiveness. You belong to me. The need of an attachment figure in life is part of our nature that God created us with. When there is no attachment figure for a child, there is widespread mental and physical defects that develop within the first year of life. Being fed and cared for is not enough. There is a need for an emotional relationship with loving and protecting caretakers. There's a need to develop a relationship, a bonding in that initial state of life. In the 1940s, Dr. Renee Spitz did a study of infants born to mothers who were incarcerated in prison. At that time, if a mother gave birth to a child, she was not allowed to raise the child. The child was taken from her and placed in a hospital environment. There was one nurse for every 8 babies. Every need of that child was met. If it was hungry, it was fed. If it cried, the nurse would find out why. If it was sick, it was taken care of. If it had natural needs in life, they were met. The nurse checked them carefully. They tried to provide everything necessary. But they found that these children who were placed in this sterile environment, even though everything they needed in life was taken care of, by the end of the first year they showed signs of mental retardation. They could not speak or had no beginnings of speech. They cried frequently. They never smiled. They were apathetic. They were unresponsive. They caught infections easily. Their mortality rate was 3 to 5 times higher than other infants because they had no mother. We need mother. We must have mother in our life. Without mother, we will never develop into a whole person. Research shows that the availability of a loving partner is a precondition for the immature offspring to develop normally in life. If there is no mother, there will be no normal development. God has designed the child to need the parent, but He's also designed the parent to be able to take care of the child. Love grows between the child and its parents, and it becomes stronger. Anxiety and fear arises in the life of the child as it becomes independent and realizes there is a distinction between me and mom. We're not the same. Mom might leave, and so as the child recognizes the difference, they will become clinging to mom in life. If mom wants to go somewhere and she don't want to take her child and she gets a babysitter, she usually has to sneak out the door so the child doesn't see her leave. The child sees mom leave, the child pitches a fit because they realize there's a separateness. I can lose mom. Mom can go out the door and not come back. As that child matures and that understanding becomes more prevalent, between the age of 1 and 3, a baby will object. They will weep, they will cling, they will cry when mom leaves or goes away. And when mom returns, they meet her ecstatically. Research shows that babies smile wider and longer for mom than they do anyone else in life. When they see mom, even in a crowd, the smile hits their face. They recognize mom, and there's an attachment for mother. If mom is gone for a period of time, then the child goes into a grieving state. They will protest, scream, cry. There will be a frantic effort made to get away, to be with mom. There will be despair that arises in their life. They may sniffle and weep. They will look and act increasingly hopeless. They will become detached. They will begin to detach themselves socially from others and mom. And when mom comes back, they will act like mom doesn't even exist because they've grieved for the loss. In the first 3 years of life, there are some developments that take place. The child begins to learn about who he is. By the age of 6, he's answered all the questions to life. Who am I? What is life? What must I do? What is good? What is bad? By 6, not 10, 11, 12, 13, or 14. Before the age of 6, children have developed the knowledge of good and evil. If parents don't spend time with their children during this time, there will be some needs lost. There are 3 basic needs or goals that we all strive for in life. We need love, we need confidence, we need worth. If love is given to a child, they will have a sense of well-being. If confidence is given, they will feel like they can accomplish things in life. If worth is given, they will feel valuable. However, if these 3 things are absent in a child's life, if a child doesn't receive love, then you will see a child who struggles for power and authority in circumstances or relationships. They will control relationships. If confidence is missing, you will see a child who seeks attention because they don't have confidence in who they are, so they become the clown of life so they can build their own confidence. If worth is missing, they will substitute perfection because I give them no worth in life. God made us to survive, and we are survivors. We will do whatever's necessary to survive. I don't know if you've heard of a terminology, and I'm going to talk about this because I have experienced it twice in the last 2 months. There is a disorder that is classified as multiple personality disorder. We've said people were devil possessed. Multiple personality disorder is a product of severe abuse. When a child is severely abused and they can't handle the abuse, God made them to be a survivor. And when that core personality of who they are, the good part of them, cannot handle the abuse, and the pressure begins to mount and grow greater and greater in life, and they don't know how to understand what's going on in life, their personality literally fractures into parts. And every part that fractures will develop an identity to protect the inner person. I have met and am dealing with a multiple personality. She's a young lady about 31 years of age. She is a school teacher. She teaches children who have been abused in life. She has a specialty in children who have disabilities. She's a very intelligent young lady, but she grew up in a very violent and abusive family. When she was about 6 weeks old, Dad came drunk. And he come into the house in his drunken state, and he grabbed this 6-week-old infant and threw it up against the wall. Took a gun out and cocked it and put it to the child's head and told Mom, "I'm fixing to blow your child away." That was the beginning of abuse that would start and last for 17 years of her life. Abuse that we can't even comprehend. Beatings that were so ruthless that it's beyond our understanding that a human being could do this to someone else. The abuse was widespread. It wasn't just with her. Dad abused the whole family. There were 7 children. All of them were abused by Dad. He was extremely violent. He manipulated and controlled his family. He wrecked their lives. This child could not handle all that was happening to it before the age of 6. Multiple personalities developed before the age of 8. Okay. How can an 8-year-old be devil-possessed? Not a possession issue. God made us to survive, and we are survivors. We will learn to survive. We will learn to protect ourselves. We will learn to build a fence around our lives, if necessary, to protect the integrity of who I am. I have been working with this lady for about 9 months, and I never could find out what the problem was. I just could never get a handle on what was really happening. And as I began to work with her and to uncover some of the story, and I began to hear about the violence and the abuse that took place, I began to suspect that we might have a problem here. And about 4 weeks ago, one night in a session, a little 6-year-old girl talked to me out of a 31-year-old body. And when she spoke to me, she had all the actions of a 6-year-old. And I saw the protector of her life, the 6-year-old that was developed to protect the innocent. The anger, the rage, was all still there. We're trying to blend that life back together to make it whole. The object of dealing with multiple personalities is to blend them into one. To put them all back, to take the fragments and put them back together. The church started coming by her house when she was about 6, picking up Sunday school kids, and so she started riding the bus to church. When she was 12, she received the baptism of the Holy Ghost in Sunday school. She came home and told her mom that she had received the Holy Ghost, and her mom got angry. Mom was a backslidden Assembly of God lady. And she was angry at what had happened. And as she began to tell her experience, Mom said, "You'll never go back to church." But Dad never agreed with Mom. So Dad stood up and said, "She can go to church if she wants to. You won't stop her." So she was allowed to continue going to church. And she went to church till she was about 15 years of age. She came home one Sunday night after church. Preacher brought her home after church. He and his wife let her out in the front yard. They lived out in the country. And after the preacher drove off and she walked in the house, Dad was in one of his drunken stupors. He became enraged and he began to beat her. And he beat her until she fell on the floor and could not even stand up. Then he grabbed her by the hair of the head and he beat her face against the telephone until the telephone literally burst into pieces. Her face was swelled for months before it would ever go back down and she looked like a normal human being again. Dad said to her, "You will never attend church again as long as I live. You're not going back to that church. Call your preacher now and see what he can do for you." She was able to contact the pastor several weeks later. Tell him what happened. The pastor said, "Honey, the Bible says to obey your parents. So you need to obey Mom and Dad. God's going to take care of you." She was very intelligent. By her junior year in high school, she had finished all of her schoolwork. So she only had to go half a day. And she called her pastor and arranged to get a key to the church. So every day she'd get out of school at 12. She'd walk 7 miles to the church, unlock the church and go inside and clean the church until about 3:30 in the afternoon. And there, cleaning the church, she could worship, pray. That was her church service. That's all the church she ever had until she finally escaped from home at the age of 17. During that time, no matter the conditions of weather, she walked to church. If it was snowing, she walked to church. She had her church, just her and God. She said, I want to tell you an experience, but you probably won't believe what I'm going to tell you. She said, one night, about 3 o'clock in the morning, I was awakened. And the Lord was standing at the foot of my bed. Standing beside Him was 2 tall angels. The Lord said, I have come so that we can have church. These walls are soundproof. Nobody's going to hear what goes on. It's just us. No one will ever know this ever happened. An angel took her by the hand, took her out of bed, and they worshiped and danced and shouted for over an hour in the presence of the Lord. She just worshiped God. She worshiped so hard and so long she was exhausted and fell on the floor. And the angel picked her up, put her in bed, pulled the covers up over her, and disappeared. See, God teaches you how to survive. God taught her how to survive. And God didn't leave her alone. God came and visited her when she had need. In life, we learn to protect ourselves. And there are a lot of things that happen to us that make us a survivor. We learn to imitate. In the first 3 years of life, a child physically is an actor. Activity is essential to growth. I've met a lot of parents who won't allow their children to go outside and play in the dirt. They're afraid they'll get dirty. If you don't allow your children to play, you may cause them to have learning disabilities. Learning disabilities are the product of inactivity. Dyslexia, the seeing of letters backwards, the reversal of letters, is dealt with by a doctor, or the therapy to correct that is eye-hand coordination. They teach them to bounce a basketball or to catch a ball. They have a little game that has a little buoy with 2 ropes through the center of it and a handle on each rope at each end. And you pull it and the buoy runs down the rope to the other end. And the object is to learn how to let it get to the right spot before you pull it apart and force it to the other end. Play. Play is a vital part of a child's life. If a child is not allowed to play, you handicap his ability to learn. I've had my family doctor tell me several times that every child needs to eat a few spoonfuls of dirt. Good for them. I didn't say that, he did. Play is essential to development. It's where a child learns how to share. In the original state, that child is not very sharing. Actually, in the beginning, you spread a blanket out and you put one child on this side, another child on that side, and he plays with his toys here and they play with their toys over there. After a while, their play changes to begrudging sharing. They share, but you make them to. Not because they want to, it's because you make them. Remember last night when we talked about the 4 stages of love? The possessive state. You're mine, infancy. You belong to me. I will not share you with someone else. It's easy to tell when an adult was injured in life. You just look at the way they love. If an adult loves in a possessive way, I don't allow you to associate with no one else. You can't be around anyone else. I want to be with you every time you go to the store, every place you go. That child was wounded in the cradle. The adult was wounded in the cradle. If a child or an adult loves in a manipulative way in which they're trying to get their way, if you really love me, you'd let me do so and so. Okay, that adult was wounded in childhood, 3 to 9. If a child or an adult loves in a manipulative way that's selfish to meet their needs and they don't care about nobody else, that child was wounded in adolescence, early teenage years. That adult was wounded at that time. All we have to do is look at how we love and we find out what happened to us in life. In the beginning, he's an actor. He imitates what he sees. Mentally, he's a discoverer. He's discovering himself, his world, his environment, and everything around him. Religiously, he's an imitator. When you bring him to church, he learns to act out what everybody else is doing at church. He raises his hands when everybody else is raising their hands. From 4 to 5, physically, he's a player. Mentally, he's a questioner. Why, Dad? What's that for? Why'd you do that? Where are we going now? How come? Questions, questions, questions. But that's how he learns. How did you learn? By asking questions. We can get angry at the questions. Religiously, he's a believer. He believes what he has been taught in life. Between the age of 6 and 8, physically, he's a hustler. My son brought a bicycle home one day, and I asked him, where'd you get that bicycle? He said, well, I traded the boy across the street for it. I said, what did you trade him? He said, some basketball cards. I said, take the bicycle home, son. It's not yours. They're hustlers between 6 and 8. They're learning to make deals in life. They're learning that life is more than just their fence and their backyard. That there's a lot of kids in the neighborhood and they start learning how to get away from home. They went to school and learned there's a whole lot of other kids in their environment, in their neighborhood, and they start making contact with those children. They're hustlers. They can hustle anything. Mentally, they're an observer. They're watching you. They're checking out your actions, what you're doing, what you're saying. You know, we have a philosophy in America that says, don't do as I do, but do as I say. Okay. That is the biggest lie that has ever been taught. If you can't say it or can't do it, don't say it. Don't expect a child to do what you can't do yourself. Religiously, he's a discriminator. He's checking things out. Why? I was principal of a Christian school for 9 years, and I separated 2 6-year-olds one day who were fighting. I finally got them apart and asked them why they were fighting, and they finally told me why they were fighting. It was right before Christmas, and one 6-year-old had the nerve to tell the other 6-year-old that Daddy was the Santa Claus, that there was no real Santa Claus. And these 2 6-year-olds were fighting because there was no Santa Claus. One had burst the bubble of the other one. He was sure there was a Santa Claus. He's a discriminator. You know, some of the fairy tales in life that he's been told, he figures out they don't work. Between the age of 9 and 11, physically he's a rover. Mentally he's an investigator. Socially he's a gangster. He don't allow girls to play in his groups. He excludes them from life. Spiritually, he's a worshiper. Between the age of 12 and 14, we start seeing a lot of problems arise. Why? Because there are a lot of changes start taking place in life. Their feet outgrow their body. All of a sudden, their shoe size just starts increasing every 2 or 3 months. I bought 4 pair of shoes, 4 different shoe sizes 1 year for my son. Body starts changing, and they have no control over it. The world has taught us a lie called the Barbie doll syndrome. What beauty is? No bumps, no blemishes, no warts, no freckles, no zits. Perfect. Perfect limbs, perfect arms, perfect hands, perfect face, perfect legs. Everything's perfect. Have you seen one of those in life? They don't exist, do they? God makes every creation unique. All of us are unique masterpieces. God don't make junk. He has never created junk in life. Everything God touches is a masterpiece. But God so loves uniqueness that there are no 2 snowflakes alike. How many trillion fall in a snowstorm, but no 2 of them are alike? How many snowstorms have been since the beginning of time, but no 2 of them are alike? God so loves uniqueness that nothing He's created is like the one He created before. There's a difference in every one. God don't make junk. But the world has sold us this bill of goods of what beauty is. What is beauty? I asked a beautiful young lady of about 15 years of age one day, if I could give you 3 wishes in life, what would your first wish be? And what she asked for? I'd ask for a new face. She was beautiful. I said, why? Because I'm ugly. Someone had taught her a lie in life. She was not ugly. Counseled with a young lady last summer. Actually, it started about this time last year. She was suffering from major depression. And she was seeing her medical doctor. He had put her on medication, but he encouraged her to have counseling. And so she called and set up counseling. And I began to work with her. As we began to talk about some things in life, I asked her about herself, and her definition or description of herself was, I'm a loser. I can never do anything right in life. So I started asking questions. She began to tell me her story. At the age of 12, she came home from church one night, and she had gotten into an argument with another young lady at church, and the other young lady had hurt her feelings. So she came home. Dad was sitting at the table, and she came into the room where Dad was at, and she sat down in a chair beside Dad, and Dad realized she was upset. So he asked her, "What's wrong?" And so she told Dad the story. And when she got through, Dad's comment was, "Honey, you might as well accept it. Nobody will ever like you in life." 12 years of age. Nobody will ever like you in life. Guess what? She's proved it. For the next 20-something years of her life, she's lived out the prophecy of Dad that nobody will ever like you in life. You'll never be accepted. She grew up and attached herself to a young man that was abusive even before she married him. He had hit her several times and abused her. He called her every name in the book, told her she was stupid and dumb, that she didn't have any sense at all, that she would never measure up. She married him anyway. You have something in your own life you're afraid to deal with. So it's easier to point a finger at somebody else and criticize than deal with what's going on in your life. As changes take place and no one talks to a child about their body changing, becoming an adult's a terrifying thing. Think about it. If you was a child and you know what's in our world today as an adult, would you want to leave childhood and become an adult? No. It's a terrorizing thing. To leave childhood, security of childhood, and become an adult, they'll step out of being an adult and step back into childhood. They'll step out, they'll step back. They'll step out, they'll step back. I watched my daughter as she entered this stage in life 4 or 5 years ago. I was traveling and came home one day, and the stairs to the attic were pulled down, and there was a black bag laying at the bottom of the stairs. And I asked my wife, "What's going on?" She said, "Well, Jill decided that she's outgrown her Barbie dolls and she's going to put them up. She don't want to play with them no more." So she put them all in a bag and they put them in the attic. I said, "Okay, no big deal." About 4 months later, I came home and they were all over her room again. I asked my wife, "What's going on?" Well, she decided she wasn't quite ready to give them up. In the next year, that ladder went up and down probably 10 times before they ever stayed in the attic. At this time in life, if a parent doesn't give that child value or validity in life, they feel like they're a reject. You've heard the Jewish bar mitzvah? Actually, it's a ceremony of allowing a child to become an adult. At 12 years of age, they have a celebration. The rabbi comes to their house. They have a big party. A big feast is prepared. After everyone eats, the rabbi has a speech that he gives. And when he gets through, Dad gets down on his knees and he raises his hands and he says, "God, I thank you that you have delivered me from the responsibility of my son. I am no longer responsible for his actions. He is now accountable for everything he does. Thank you, God, for relieving me of that responsibility and giving it to him." We don't do that. We don't allow our children to grow up. When they reach this age and they start becoming an adult, we don't stamp any value on their life that they are an adult. About a year ago, a lady called, the lady in Houston who made my appointments at that time, and said, "Does Dr. Hughes do exorcisms?" She said, "Well, I don't know. You'll just have to come find out." Well, she didn't tell me about this. She just set up the appointment. So I walk into the office that day, and she calls me aside and says, "This lady's here for a particular reason. She wants to know if you do exorcisms." Well, okay. So I invited her in the office, and following her was a tall, dark-haired young man, about 19 years of age. Very nice-looking young man. Very polite, very kind. They walk in, both sit down on the couch, and I have a preliminary form I go through about gathering information of name, address, brief history of their backgrounds and parents and all this. And finally, I got all that information, and I simply said, "What can I do for you?" She said, "Well, do you do exorcisms?" Well, I said, "Well, who needs the devil cast out of him?" I hate that word, exorcism. She said, "My son." I said, "How come? What makes you think he has the devil?" She started telling me the story. Her and her husband worked in Saudi Arabia. They had been there for 25 years. He had a brother who was 25 years of age and had graduated from college and was very successful in the engineering field. Dad had worked continuously in Saudi Arabia for 25 years. Well, it was easy to deduct that this boy was born in Saudi Arabia, not in the United States. So I listened as she told the story. In Saudi Arabia, when a boy gets to be 12 years of age, he's not allowed to go to their public school system unless he joins the Islamic faith. And so at the age of 12, Mom and Dad had to make a decision. What do we do with our son? Are we going to let him become part of the Islamic religion, or are we going to do something about it? So they decided when the oldest boy reached 12, they would take him to Europe and put him in a boarding school. So when he reached 12 years of age, they took him off to Europe, enrolled him in a boarding school, and he thought he was on a mission of discovery of life. He was away from Mom and Dad. The whole world was before him, and he was going to have a great time. He enjoyed it. He loved every minute of being away. He loved the thrill of being in a new place, of the challenge of being there, and no problems. But as the 6-year-old began to mature and start reaching 12 years of age, at about the age of 11 and a half, he burnt the house down. He set it on fire. They have a very strict way of dealing with things like that in Saudi Arabia. They just came and got the 12-year-old, went to the airport and bought him a ticket, stuck him on an airplane and shipped him off to Europe, all in about 2 hours' time. No visa, no passport, no nothing. He's gone. Well, Mom can't go with him because her passport's not with her. She don't have a ticket, so she has to go home, go to consulate, get her passport stamped, verified, run, get a plane ticket. A couple of days later, she winds up in Europe trying to find her 12-year-old son that's been deported out of the country. Well, she can't go back to Saudi Arabia. So what are we going to do? So she calls husband and they confer about it. Well, let's send him the same boarding school his brother went to. So they took him to Europe, put him in a boarding school. Mom got on her airplane, flew back to Saudi Arabia and got off, and a telegram said, "Come get your son." He burnt school down. So she gets on her airplane, flies back to Europe, gets her son. Now he's not welcome in Europe. He's not welcome in Saudi Arabia, so she flies back home to Houston where her dad lives. And she's trying to figure out what to do. Well, if I want to raise him, I've got to stay here and put him in school. And Dad, he has some real unique things to say about what they are to do with this boy. And so there's arguing about what to do with him. Finally, she finds a boarding school on the East Coast that'll accept him. So they fly over to the East Coast, put him in a boarding school. She waits a couple of weeks to make sure everything's settling okay. Everything looked to be fine. Got on her plane, went back to Saudi Arabia. 6 months later, she gets a telegram from the boarding school that her son ran away. And for the next 7 years of his life, she never heard from him. He disappeared. About a month before he appeared in that office, she got a call from Denver, Colorado that said, "Your son is in prison or in jail, and you need to come and either bail him out or do whatever you need to help him." She got on her airplane, went to Denver and found her son. He was in jail. The 12-year-old that ran away from boarding school on the East Coast, hijacked or hitchhiked all the way across America to Denver. And for 7 years had lived on the streets of Denver, Colorado. He lived under the bridges. He lived in old buildings. He just survived. How is a 12-year-old going to make it? He got involved in drugs and peddling drugs, and he finally got caught. He was in jail for peddling drugs. And I said, why do you think he's possessed? She said, well, when I was about 12 years old, my mother and dad took me to the doctor, and the doctor diagnosed me as being psychopathic and that I'd be a criminal and that all my kids born would be criminals too, so I just figured he's got to be devil possessed. I said, ma'am, did it ever dawn on you that he was trying to get your attention? That boy did not want to be abandoned and left alone? That your older son may have enjoyed going off from home, but this one just wanted to be around the house with mom and dad? And I started talking to her about this childhood business. Of when a child steps out, it becomes the parent's responsibility of verifying their adulthood. If mom and dad don't create an adulthood for them by verifying the fact they have become an adult, and they keep treating them like a child, they never grow up. She started weeping. She was 55 years old. She said, you know what? I'm still a little girl. I'm 55 years of age, and my dad tells me what kind of car I can drive. He buys my house. He takes all our money that we make and invests it. We never see a penny of it. He dictates everything that happens in our life. It kind of sounds to me like you're doing the same thing to your son. You won't allow him to grow up. You've never verified he's an adult. You never gave him value that he's an adult human being. You kept treating him like he's a kid. And so, as the child grows, he still sees himself as a child, and they never get past the child stage. Here was a 55-year-old who was still being treated like a child. Well, it wasn't but about a month later that I met a 74-year-old whose mother was still alive, about 96, and she was still being treated like a child. We need to realize how important some of these stages are in our life and what we need to do to empower our children to become adults. Let's take a short break. As we continue looking at development in life, let me say one other thing about this age, and then we'll go on to the other 4 stages of development. During this time, it is not uncommon for parents to become very critical of their children and to get very impatient for their clumsiness. When their body has outgrown their coordination, they are very clumsy. When he starts to reach across the table to grab his glass of tea and his arms are longer than what they used to be, he might knock it over. I was broke of that habit real quick. My son knocked a glass over and I was scolding him, and I knocked 3 over. So I learned not to argue or to scold about clumsiness at the table. That's part of this stage. There's an inward focus on self because of the changes that are happening, and if we don't address them and help them through this stage and help them understand they're not warped because they're going through it, there's nothing wrong with them. It's just part of growing up. It's very difficult. Next stage, 15 to 18. This is the latter end of the teenage years. Physically, he's an achiever. His body's finally caught up with his feet, and he's coordinated, and now he can put the move on dad. Mentally, he's searching for power. God made children to be independent. They're not supposed to live at home all their life. And if we empower them with independence, when they reach maturity, they will step out. There are 3 brain chemicals missing in a child. Those 3 brain chemicals give them the ability to rationalize. They don't start being produced until they reach puberty. Usually, it doesn't start happening until around the age of 15. To rationalize with a child is like talking to a wall. You've got to teach consequences of behavior. Dr. Spock recanted everything he said before he died, that none of it worked. You don't give a 2-year-old a lecture on the law of physics about every action there is an equal and opposite reaction when he runs out in the street. You tell him all day what's going to happen to him if he runs out in the street. And it probably will never sink in. And when he runs out in the street and he steps off the curb, you swat him on the behind and tell him no. Now there's a difference between discipline and abuse. Any adult can get even. If you discipline your children in anger, you're getting even. You're not disciplining them. If you do it in anger, you'll abuse them. You'll leave marks on them. God wants us to discipline our children, but He don't want us to scar them. And a word to you parents. The Living Bible says in Ephesians 6 and 4, don't keep on nagging and criticizing your children, making them resentful, but rather bring them up with the loving discipline that the Lord Himself approves of. If the child steps off the curb again, you still don't give him a lecture. You swat him and say no. Third time he starts to step off, his behind tells him that it hurts. Okay? So he just don't step off. You can rationalize and reason all day long, and it won't sink in. Don't try. Don't happen till the age of 15. Then it starts kicking in. Now, girls mature quicker than boys, so you'll see it happening with them about 12 or 13. Part of the way God made it. Socially, he's looking for friendship. Spiritually, he's unstable. The most spiritual unstable time of life is 15 to 18 years of age. Okay? Count on it. It's going to happen. (18 to 30) is the age of family and career selection. We finally have reached the age in which we can go out on our own. We focus on our career. We focus on family growth, marriage, managing a home, interpersonal relationships, physical and emotional developments. I said last night that you're a rookie when you get married. You have to learn to live with your marriage partner. There are some things you just learn to do, not because you like them, but because you want to keep peace. I don't enjoy spaghetti, but I eat it probably twice, 3 times a month. I have 3 other people in my house that love the stuff. They'd eat it every day. Now I can fight and pitch a fit and say I don't want it and all this business, but I've learned to eat it. What's wrong with that? I've never seen where there was any thrill of spending 7 hours in a shopping center and going home with nothing. I don't get a thrill out of touching fabric and walking from store to store, taking clothes off the rack and saying, oh, that's nice, and hanging them back up and going to the next store. I just don't get a thrill out of any of that. That's just not exciting to me. But I have 2 ladies at my house that can spend weeks in the same store. I learned real quick. There was an easy solution to that. Okay? I learned that, hey honey, let me have the kids and we'll go to the park and you go shopping. Okay? I took the kids out of her hair and she'd go do her thing. And then I didn't have to walk all day from store to store. And when I go to the store, I know what I want before I get there, and I usually know what store it's at, and I go in, find it, buy it, and leave. You know, I don't spend all day looking. I don't even look for bargains. I just go buy what I want. But that's not what happens at my house. Now, we could be at odds over this. We could fight. We could argue. We could have major discussions. But isn't it a lot easier sometimes to just bend a little bit? To be married, we still have a separate identity, and there needs to be some separateness in relationships. Now, she needs her time and you need yours. Let me point out another issue that we need to learn. If you spend time dealing with issues, you need to spend the same amount of time just enjoying being together. If you spend an hour arguing, spend an hour at the park just walking, enjoying each other's company. You got a balanced life. Okay. If the tree of life starts leaning this direction because all you're doing is addressing problems, you better start putting something on this side to get it back to level. It needs to be balanced. We don't settle issues correctly. If we have never settled an issue, then we don't have a pattern to do it. So we wait till we get angry, and after we get mad and blow up, we go drag everything in the closet out and we throw it all out on the table, and we're going to fix it all at one time. We never get anything settled, so we grab it all back up, go open the closet, throw it back in, shut the door. And we wait till we get angry a second time. Then when we get angry the second time, we go open the door, drag it all out and throw it out on the table and try to fix it again. Then every time something happens, we just open the door and throw it inside and close it. And that closet just stacks on up. Okay? You can only settle issues one at a time. Stay focused. If you start dealing with an issue, don't get sidetracked. Deal with that issue until it's settled and leave the rest of them alone. Okay? Then get something else out and settle it. We learn to live with each other. We learn how to be married. I have an illustration. Remember my story of the differences we have in background? Well, I have a story I made up about this, of his background, her background. I made this story up, and I hoped it was so bizarre that it would never fit anybody's life. And the second time I told it, a lady met me right here at the front of the altar, and she started shaking her finger at me. She said, "I want to know who told you about my life." I said, "Nobody told me." "I want to know who told you about my life." I said, "Nobody told me about it. I don't even know who you are." "Somebody told you about me." "I don't know. What are you talking about?" "You know that story you told?" "Yeah. That's my story." Okay. My story I thought was bizarre is not bizarre. It's reality. It is bizarre. His background is this ball or sphere with all these little round pegs on it. Hers is that sphere with all the square ones. Okay? We're going to make these fit. Fits, don't it? You've always heard you couldn't put a round peg in a square hole? Have you been taught that? God, you know, that's not the truth. You can. My brother and I got in an argument one day when I was about 9 years old. My little brother, who's 4 years younger than I am, had one of those little wooden things that had all the little cutouts on it with the moon, the star, and the hexagon, the octagon, and the square and the round peg. And he said, "You can't put that round peg in that square hole." I said, "Yes, you can." "No, you can't." "Yes, you can." "No, you can't." "Yes, you can." "Prove it." So I ran out in the garage and I found Dad's hammer. And I ran back in there and I went, boom! And I drove it in that hole. I got it in. but it obeyed all of God's laws of nature too. One of them's called friction. And friction produces a lot of heat. It was so hot you couldn't touch it. Okay? Our differences in background is usually the thing we fight about the most. And this is the way we settle it. Now, honey, this don't fit. Hold still. And you run out in the garage and get the hammer and chisel, and you run back in and you say, now hold still, honey, this won't hurt one little bit. We're always going to fix the other person. We never want to fix ourselves. The only person I have the ability to change has my shoes on. The biggest devil I fight in life has my shoes on as well. Called flesh. You can actually make both of them fit. If you'll round off the corners of the square one and take and slice off the round edges of the round one, they'll both be just alike. But we don't want to do that. You know, you're a whole lot more gentler with yourself than you are with someone else. You know when it pains. You know when it hurts. You know when to stop. You'll take off ears and noses and everything else when you use the chisel on somebody else. The only person I can fix is me. Nobody else. My story goes like this. This young lady was born to a family in which Dad was this charismatic, people-oriented person. He was a salesman. He loved people. He also liked bright colors, sports cars. He was a talker. He could talk to anybody. He never met a stranger. He was a very touchy person. He was very affectionate because the way he showed affection was to put his hand on it. If he talked to you, he'd touch you as he was talking because that's the only way he could make connection. The daughters grew up in this family, and Dad loved his children. And they learned real early in life that if I crawled up in Dad's lap and put my arms around Dad's neck and I hugged Dad real tight and say, "Oh, Dad, I love you. You're the best dad in all the world," Dad's heart would melt. He'd say, "Oh, honey, come on, let's go to the store." And they'd go out and get in the car and they'd drive off. They'd go down to the local toy store and Dad'd take them inside and do a little shopping. They'd come home with dolls and coloring books and toys and all kinds of gadgets. They learned real quick that if they said, "Dad, I love you, you're the best dad in the world," they got a response. And as time went on, the dolls become dresses and purses, and as they matured and grew, everything that they wanted in life, all they had to do was tell Dad in the right way, and Dad would respond and give it to them. The young man grew up in a slightly different home. He grew up in a home in which Dad was a sergeant in the Marines. There were 5 boys, and he happened to be the middle son. When they went somewhere, no one argued over who sat by the door because Dad already had it prearranged. He lined them up. They all stood at attention. Dad checked out their clothes to make sure their shoes were polished, the seams were in the right place, and everybody had their shirts tucked in, their belts were on, and we all march out and get in the car. We followed order. When you walk into Dad's garage, all of his tools hang on the wall, and there's a little black outline so that every tool has a spot. If you use the tool, you put it back in the spot where you found it. If you walk into Dad's closet, all of his clothes are arranged in order. From his suits go from the dark color to the light one. Above it, his shirts are in order from the dark to the light, and his shoes match all of those underneath. If you walk over and pull out the dresser drawer where his clothes are in, his socks are all lined up in a row. His underclothes are folded in a neat stack because he's learned to live in a little box about this long and this wide and this tall, and he knows where everything fits. When you walk through the back door, you don't leave your jacket at the back door and your shoes in the hall and your shirt somewhere else and discard it as you go along. At Dad's house, whenever you use something, you put it up. If it's dirty, it goes in the hampers. You walk into the laundry room, and there's a basket for the dirty clothes, or the dark clothes. There's a basket for the white ones. There's a basket for the delicates, and you put your items where they belong in the dirty clothes baskets. Very ordered. Dad knows where every penny goes. He keeps a ledger every month. He can tell you how much money's in savings. He can tell you how much money they spent on utilities, how much money they spent for rent, how much for their house, their car, their insurance. Every expenditure in life he has listed. He knows what's left over, and at the end of the month he knows what they can use to have a good time and what he's set aside for future use. Well, this young man and young lady get together, and guess what? They talk to each other about all these differences, right? Everybody courting always discusses their past, right? Wrong. Have you ever stood beside two of them that had been courting? They don't even make sense. I stood beside two about a year ago and listened to them talk. I eavesdropped. One of them would start a sentence, the other one would finish it. They never made complete statements about anything. They were reading each other's mind. It didn't make a lick of sense what they were talking about. They always discuss these round pegs and square ones, right? No. They go home, get married, the honeymoon is over, and they start discovering each other. All of a sudden, square ones and the round ones don't quite fit. We got to fix this. So one day she awoke and she said to her husband, "You know, honey, we've been married 6 months and you haven't bought me a new dress. You know, did I tell you today I love you and you're the best husband in the world?" Husband said, "Well, honey, come here, let me show you something." So he walked into the spare bedroom where his desk was, and he pulled out his little ledger, and he said, "Now look, we make this much money. This is what our house note costs. This is what our rent, our car expense, our insurance, our utilities, our gasoline, our food, our clothing, and this is all we have left." Okay? That's not quite enough to buy you a new dress. So let's put it in savings. In about 3 months' time, we will have accumulated enough to buy you a new dress. How about that? He goes off to work. Sister calls. She says, "How you doing today?" "Well, I'm not doing too good. I found out my husband doesn't love me like Dad does. When I told Dad I loved him, he's the best dad in the world, he'd buy me anything I wanted. I told my husband I loved him, he's the best husband in the world, and I asked him for a new dress, and he gave me a lecture on economics." They had a pity party. Sister said, "Hey, I got an idea. Let's have a garage sale." "Great. Good idea." So sister gets in her car and drives across town and picks up her other sister, and they run to the supermarket and buy their poster board, run to the hardware store and buy their little stakes and paint their little signs, staple them on the stakes, put them all over the neighborhood, and go home and have a garage sale. That afternoon, husband come home from work. He walked inside the house, walked through the living room, and started down the hall and stopped. Something just wasn't right about the living room. He couldn't quite figure out, but something was just out of place. So he backed up and turned around and looked in the living room. "Honey, where's the couch?" "Where's my leather chair?" "Well, you know, I asked you this morning if you would buy me a new dress, and you told me we didn't have any money. So my sister said, let's have a garage sale, and I figured out that'd be a pretty good way. Would you like to see my new dress? I made $300 today in my garage sale." When he walked out to the garage, all of the tools off of the little black marks were empty, and there were just black marks on the wall. Do you think they were happy campers? Now, I told that as a story I made up, but you know what? It's not a story, it's the truth. I can take you and introduce you to the couple that happened to. Why? Because they never addressed how we learn how to love. Okay? She had been taught all her life that if you say I love you in the right way with the right compliments, you get anything you want. And she learned a lesson real quick that it don't work that way. A lesson real quick. It just don't work that way. There was anger. They fought. They finally learned how to settle their differences. But they first had to go back and uncover the differences. When she walked in the house, her clothes were scattered all over the house. He come home and saw clothes laying in the floor and things all out of place and would get angry. She finally learned how to pick up after herself. Usually it's the other way around, but in this case, it wasn't a male throwing the things in the floor. Why? And it caused a lot of contention. A lot of problems. They were easy to solve when they started talking about them. They learned, first of all, your house is not a museum. You don't give guided tours. People live there. Okay. If it gets a little bit out of order, it ought to be all right. There's such a thing as being too far one direction. So they learned that on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday they kept it straight, and on Tuesday and Thursday it could be messed up. Pretty good compromise, huh? See what we can do if we use a little imagination? We can solve any problem if we want to. If we're willing to compromise. But we're so afraid of that word spiritually that we won't even let it affect us physically and emotionally in our home. There's nothing wrong at home with compromising. If you ever want to settle an issue, somebody's going to have to compromise. It's a lot easier to meet in the middle than it is to swing to either side. If you swing to either side, both of you are going to be mad. If you can meet in the middle, you found peace. We have to learn how to settle issues. The next stage is the 30 to 35. It's called middle age. Notice the age. 30 to 55. Middle age. 30 to 55. Now, we always think middle age is around 45, right? How many 90-year-olds have you seen lately? God promised us 70 years. What's half of 70? 35. Yeah. Not 45 or 55. Middle age starts at about 30. Somewhere around 28, you kick in and start trying to solve all your problems of life. God gives us children so we can grow up. Think about it. Grandparents will be a whole lot better off raising their kids than we are because we're immature and we don't know. But God gives us kids so we can grow up. And we mature with them. We heal with them. I'm convinced God gives you your spouse so that you can help each other heal. The person you live with is the one who has the ability to help you heal. They're a balance to life. You usually marry an opposite, not someone just like you. And the opposite in our life gives us balance, but it's also the source of all of our fighting. Between 35 and 55, the major issue of life is maintaining an economic standard of living. You start worrying about the younger guys taking your job away from you. You refocus on self and goals. You start assisting teenage children become adults, and that's a nightmare in anybody's book. I told my wife one good thing about it won't kill either one of us. Okay, we're not going to die. We can just endure. Okay? We have to learn to relate to one spouse as a person. Physiological changes. We start spreading out. We can't handle it because we have adjusted physiologically and we get angry and upset at what's going on in life, and so We want to be young again. Do you know most sports injuries happen to guys between 30 and 55 years of age? They're out trying to act like teenagers, and they just can't do it anymore, and they won't admit it. Okay? They won't grow up. We're worried about everybody else catching us. This is the most terrifying age in life. You know why? Because the child becomes the parent. If mom and dad are still alive, you have to take over their decision-making process for them. When they can't drive anymore and they can't go to the store anymore, somebody's got to go do it for them. I remember distinctly driving down the street one day and threw on my brakes. Dad was sitting beside me, and I threw my arm out to keep him from hitting the dash. I remember him doing that to me when I was a kid. But I now fulfill that role. Not only do I have those behind me I'm having to take care of as children, but I have those in front of me that I have to take care of. They're having struggles in life. You come to realize that if you haven't accomplished what you want to in life, you probably won't do it. And it becomes frustrating. It's called a midlife crisis. You start looking at life. Where am I at? Where am I going? What am I doing here? Am I a success? Am I a failure? You check up everything you've ever done in life. You check all your values out. You go back and look at them again to see what's going on. Where am I at? The last group is called our older adults, 55 and older. There's decreasing physical strength, retirement, fixed income, death of a spouse, living arrangements. Every stage of life has a unique struggle. Okay? You never outgrow struggle. It's going to follow you to the grave. We want to live on easy street where there's no problems. That doesn't exist. Let me use a chart in closing. I don't know if you can see that. This is a chart of the graph. This is age 1 to 6, 6 to 12, 12 to 18, 18 to 30, 30 to 55 and older. I drew this because most people are married by 21, right here. They have children by 23. Okay, midlife crisis starts at 35. How old is the child when the midlife crisis starts for dad? Teenager. 12, 13 years of age. We've got chaos at home. We got kids in chaos and dad in chaos, and mom's the only stable force in this whole family. Okay? That's life. Just part of it. If we know what's happening, then we know how to handle it. If we don't know what's happening, we wring our hands in worry, wondering, where are we going to from here? We're going to work into the next stage of life. You're going to leave one set of problems and pick up another one. That's life. 3 years ago, I cut my fingers off. 3 of them. One of them was laying on the floor. That one right there. See how short it is? Missing a ½ inch out of the middle. Spent 10 hours in surgery having them put back on. They reimplanted them. They live. They don't have a lot of feeling. One of them's crooked. I came out of surgery. I went in about 7 o'clock at night. Came out about 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. And finally started coming to about 11. Opened my eyes, and one of my friends is standing in the room talking to my wife, and I start overhearing this conversation. And I lay there with my eyes closed for a little bit, listening to what they were saying, and finally I opened my eyes and talked to him a little bit, and he says, well, James, what'd you learn this time? He thinks I'm an accident waiting to happen. I have had 14 surgeries, 10 of them were for accidents. Product of attention deficit disorder. I have no sense of danger, and I've been hurt because of my no sense of danger. Okay? I've had double knee surgery. I don't have a collarbone. I've had a skill saw on this leg, a chainsaw on this one. I've had a jigsaw smash this one off. This one's been cut off. These three have been cut off. What'd you learn this time? I didn't have an answer for him, but I saw him about a month later. I said, I have an answer for you. He said, for what? Remember that question you asked, what did I learn? Yeah. Let me tell you what I learned. There's more pain in healing than there is initial injury. Just because I hurt don't mean I'm not healing. I asked my doctor about it. You know what he said? He said, if you didn't hurt, we would know your fingers were dying and we'd have to take them off. The fact you hurt tells us you're healing. Just because I hurt doesn't mean God's not healing my life. Pain, struggle is a part of life. The scripture says that through suffering Christ was made perfect. The struggles of life makes us mature, not without blemish or faults. The word perfect in the scripture means mature or full grown, complete. God just wants us to grow up. He don't want you to be without spot or have no problems. He wants you to be mature. Grow up. Get a grip. But we've got to get out of being a child and become an adult to grow up. Major issue of life is becoming mature, healthy adults. That's a struggle. But all of us can reach it. You know what? It's never too late to start. We've got a saying that says you can't teach an old dog new tricks. First of all, when did we become dogs? Okay, what are we comparing ourselves to dogs for? Secondly, that's a lie.
The next day, John saw Jesus coming toward him and said, "Behold, the Lamb of God, who takes away the sins of the world."
Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not into your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct your path. Baptism, then what? Baptism is a burial in water for accountable beings unto the remission of sins, for salvation, to get into Christ, to become a new creature, to get into the one body. Then, walk in the new life, study and grow, become a servant of righteousness, keep self pure, be an example, have faith in God, follow Jesus, put first things first, resist temptation, be faithful, and be fruitful.